Good morning, everyone. How are you doing this morning? Good? I just want to thank Steve for his really good work in organizing this whole conference. He deserves a hand. Give him a hand. Even having to read that disclaimer every day is a lot of work. So, that being said, I'm going to start with a little prayer. Let me get myself where I get. Which is about merging the heavens and earth, which is really, really what this whole thing is about. Do this. Here we go. So, the issue is ultimately, it's not about live foods. It's really about having a working brain. Okay? And that's not a small thing in today's world. There's so much going on that is affecting our mind, affecting our body. And the live food is one of the, let's say, major defense systems that keeps everything working as optimally as possible. Because if we can't think, it's hard to evolve spiritually. The mind isn't working. Wisdom can't really happen. Wisdom is needed to lead a more full, conscious life. And we can see what's going on in the world today. People are losing it in many ways. There's so many factors affecting people's minds, including obviously the GMO food and the junk food and the processed food and the 5G. Well, we're not at 5G yet, but 4G. Lots of forces, and the live food is an antidote to a certain level. Because without that, you can't be creative, you can't have art, you don't have strength. It's really hard to lead your life. So that's key. So I just did the yoga class, but with the live food, what I've noticed, vegan, plant source only, is with chronological age, I'm actually almost 76, with chronological age, you can get stronger, more flexible. When I was captain of an undefeated college football team in a National Football Hall of Fame, at age 20, 21, I could do 70 push-ups and about 7 pull-ups, which is actually a fair amount. So at age 60, I hit 601 push-ups on the 6th day of a fast. How did that happen? Well, I've been on live foods for quite a few years. In fact, I became a plant source only or a vegan in 1973. You can think about that. I had a really interesting experience, which is kind of comical. My wife was pregnant with our second child, and Heather, who actually is a production stage manager on and off Broadway in different places, lives on the Lower East Side here in New York. And we both had this nightmare. What was the nightmare? That the fetus was a chicken and we were eating it. That's quite a nightmare. We became vegan overnight. We had this joint nightmare, and we became vegan overnight. Now, that's not the usually way people go vegan. You have philosophical reasons, cruelty to animals, protecting the environment, but somehow it spoke. Since that time, then I evolved. I was also in India, and when the Kundalini was awakened in 1975, I got a message: you should learn to eat and live in a way that supports the spiritual energy called Kundalini. And so as I did the research, so from 1970, really 3, but 75 to about 83, then I came to the conclusion that the best diet for spiritual life was a live food, plant-based only diet, which turns out to be the ancient diet of Gan Eden, but also the diet that the rishis, who lived 2,000, 3,000 years ago, actually lived on in India. So that's how I got to live food. It wasn't because it made me strong, but I'm making the point is that most people think, oh, if you go plant-based, you're going to be weak, and but it's just the opposite. The research really shows you have 2 to 3 times more energy, you're stronger, many good things, which I'm going to discuss in a moment. So you actually do get more flexible, stronger, and clearer, and more endurance. That's actually what really does happen. Now you have to, there's a little catch to it. If you don't pay attention to, we are unique individuals, we have a unique constitution, and we have to eat according to that constitution. You don't always do as well. So, whereas I see 99% of the people being really successful is because I have them eat according to their constitution. We actually, on our chromosome 19, this is for real, it says how much protein, how much fat, how much carbohydrate you should eat. And we are unique, we are individual, and we have to figure that out. We have to figure it out for our own uniqueness. Okay, so kind of keep that in mind, because that's the key to being really, really successful. Because this is it's a very powerful diet, and you have to be able to understand yourself enough to select the right diet for yourself. So this is my wife and I kind of connecting. Here's a few of the books. And this is where it begins in Genesis 1:29. And God said, behold, I've given you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the earth and every tree that has a seed-bearing fruit. That's your food. That's not that complicated. He didn't say processed food. He didn't say lots of dairy. He didn't say junk food. He didn't say GMO food. It's just real simple. Okay? We make it complicated. Why? Well, people make money off the complications. So what's the history of live food? It actually goes back quite a ways. We, even before Gan Eden or connected, we have the Anukis, which are live food. I won't go into that whole explanation, but clearly what I just shared was a live food diet. And then after that, you had the Pelagasians. Anyone ever hear of the Pelagasians? Well, the Pelagasians lived in southern Greece. The average age was 200. This is all documented. Herodotus, the great historian, that's how I actually found out about it, talked about it. I actually went to Greece, tried to figure out where are these people, and they were 3,000 years ago, 100% live food diet, average age 200. They really did exist. Okay, that was interesting. And then we look at Egypt. And Akhenaten and Nefertiti were live fooders. They understand that. And if you kind of look around, you see, what do they have? Sunlight coming into the plants. And so the priesthood was not just plant-based only, but it really was live food. Because they understood that was the most powerful way to eat for your spiritual life. So what I'm telling you isn't exactly new information here. It's just that it got lost along the way. So after that, we had the Essenes emerging about 600 BC in Mount Carmel, and one of the people they trained was Pythagoras, the great Greek philosopher and enlightened teacher. And he came down from Mount Carmel enlightened, but also teaching live food. And from that time, anyone who was eating a plant-based diet was called a Pythagorean, interestingly enough. And that continued to 1944, when Watson in England changed it to the term vegan. So that's kind of how that progressed. But before that, 1920, 1980s, 1880s, and on, Dr. Bertrand Brenner in Switzerland began using live food to heal people because he read Pythagoras. And they began healing all kinds of things, and including cancer. And then one of their students was Dr. Max Gerson from Germany. In 1920, he cited the first live food healing of diabetes. And if people know, that's one of the things we've done is use live foods to heal diabetes. And we're healing, it's so-called not curable, but the truth is, it's only not curable if you don't understand what you're doing. If you do drugs, do this and eat whatever you want, take insulin, you're not going to cure it. As I said yesterday, if you go in the wrong direction, this amazing thing happens. You end up in the wrong direction. But if you go to the live food, which again wasn't my idea, but Max Gerson, who did the first healing, so we heal 61% of people who are non-insulin dependent in 3 weeks. That's not exactly incurable. And people who are insulin dependent, 24% in 3 weeks are healed. Healed means no medication and a blood sugar less than 100, okay? And 86.6% are off all insulin and off all diabetic medications. That's quite a change from incurable. So that started with Max Gerson, that understanding. And then the next major live food person was Dr. Edmund Bodo-Sekeli. He taught a lot from 1940 to 1970. He was kind of activated the scene movement. And then we have Ann Wigmore, and then we have the kind of next level after her, Victor Kovinskis, and Brian Clement from Hippocrates, and myself are the next level of the live food, and then many people are teaching it after that. That gives you a little bit of the, in a sense, the lineage of this whole thing. Here's the bottom line. Thomas Edison. The chief function of the body is to carry the brain around. Think about that. That's where we started. If you don't have a brain that works, it's a problem. It's a really big problem. So live foods helps really that happen. And one step further, diet affects consciousness. Just think about that. It affects the mind. Okay? It affects how we think and ultimately our actions. So in Ayurvedic yogic teachings, we know there are 3 kinds of diets. There's what we call the sattvic diet, which is it's a diet basically ultimately like a live food diet. Initially they had dairy, but not anymore for a variety of reasons. And that helps you turn into yourself and create a quiet mind. Then you have our rajasic diet, which is very activating, and that's a more meat-eating diet. And then finally a tamasic diet, which is pretty much what Americans are on today. Junk food, drugs, and a variety of things, okay? That creates a mind of, I'm going to say sloth, and not clear, and kind of mean and cruel. These are tamasic qualities. Whereas sattvic qualities are quiet and calm and peaceful and loving. The diets affect your consciousness. So that's been known for thousands of years. This is not new information. It's just good to remind people that's what's going on. And now, food's a love note for God. I didn't really get that. I mean, I got it because I obviously wrote it down. But until I realized that when the Hebrews were in the desert and they didn't have any food for 3 days and they were pretty freaked out, God created the manna that precipitated on the ground. And it's like, okay, that is a love note from God. That's it. Everything we're getting on the living planet is a love note from God. And it's good to keep that in mind because it inspires us to take care of the ecology so we can allow the space for the love note to manifest and be read. Now, a thing that is really important is to think about, does this work? So one of my students, we had a master's program, interviewed 520 people who had been on live foods for 2 years, minimum of 2 years. So there's an 87% improvement in emotional balance and mental clarity and in spiritual experience, spiritual inspiration. And that in itself is good. But today we have a plague epidemic of depression. So many people are on antidepressants and anxiety. So 400% decrease in depression, 300% decrease in anxiety. That's very significant. What I observed, because okay, that's really interesting. I kind of know that, but that's strong data, is that when you go to live food, it actually stimulates and normalizes your neurotransmitters, which balances the brain. And if you're low on certain neurotransmitters, like dopamine and serotonin, things like that, it makes you depressed. It's not that complicated. And the really interesting finding is when people went to live food, that stuff goes away because we are increasing and bringing back and rebalancing the neurotransmitters. Now, I've researched that up a bunch of times, just clinical research, but that's a very important finding. It kind of validates it in that way. And I have people who, just doing that, turn that around. Now, I also have a book called Depression Free for Life, so I have a little experience with this. And again, the live food plays a very, very big role in helping people become, well, basically we cure 90% of people with depression, just with diet and some supplements. So that's really important because with the antidepressants, you have lots of side effects, including, believe it or not, 4 times more suicide. So it's like, wait, you're taking an antidepressant and you're getting suicide? Well, yes, it does happen. It's a fact. One of my major mentors when I was a psychiatrist in the 70s was Jonathan Coles, who had been head of the National Institute of Mental Health. And he even testified in front of the FDA, although they weren't as interested, hey, you got 3 to 4 times more depression, suicide, and they didn't want to hear that. And you need a warning on your label that this antidepressant can cause these problems. And it's kind of well known now, but it also, if you look at most of the school shootings, they're usually on some kind of antidepressant or antipsychotic, which alters the mind, agitates the mind. This is very real stuff. That's all I want to talk about, except to understand live food will rebalance the brain and bring things back into normal. Because of that, addictions go down. Now that's actually, to me, a low score, because when you're eating really well, the main driving force behind addiction is dopamine not being sufficient. What's dopamine? It's what stimulates the pleasure centers. And our driving force behind addiction is low dopamine. You're just not having much pleasure in life, so you do something to get some pleasure. The live food will activate the dopamine, increase the dopamine, and people feel a lot more joy and peace, and that's part of the antidepressant and anti-anxiety effect. 300% increase in energy, seriously 92%, but I think even more, improvement in immune system, 68% less chronic disease, 200% increase in menses comfort. The woman doing this, that was actually one of her main things. So she really had a very extensive questionnaire on that point. And she really documented how effective in different ways about really decreasing all the discomfort during menses. So that was actually an important finding. Significant decrease in constipation. There's a live food goes through the system in 25 to 40 hours, and cooked in junk food it takes 40 to 100 hours. So there's a reason for why that happens. Obviously less laxative use, 18,000%, it's a lot. Decrease in antacids, and increase in your sensitivity. You get more turned on to life. That's more what the creativity is. All five senses are working better. You experience everything more in that way. And again, an increase of around 200% in energy, at least in mice, but really in adults. So what's that on the right side there? That's Carillion photography. And it's measuring the aura of, it's a cabbage leaf, okay? So the one above is this, let's say the one below is the live food cabbage leaf. You can see the life force energy. And the one above is the same cabbage leaf cooked. Doesn't look like it has much energy, does it? Okay? That's what we're talking about. So one thing, if we're going to think ecologically, is when we cook the food, we process it, we boil it, we do whatever we're doing, it's actually breaking up the ecological wholeness. So when we're doing live food, it's really, it's the way God gave it to us through ecology. So it actually supports a consciousness of ecological wholeness. Just think about that for a moment. Now, the next thing is the research by Dr. Popp, and it increases the bio-photon energy. Now let me explain what that means, because you can see it right there. But basically, a person who is eating a lot of junk food has about 1,000 bio-photon units coming off of them. Because this is, actually, one day they showed up at my house and they had this little machine where they can measure your biophotons. Like, who are you? Well, okay, anyway. And if you're just do cooked vegan, okay, plant-based, you got about 23,000 biophotons coming off. Newborn baby is 43,000. And a person doing live food is 83,000. 83 times more than the junk food. So energy is a big deal. If you add certain herbs, I call them the tonic herbs, longevity herbs, mostly from China, you get up to 116,000. So you can see, it does make a difference. And that's what you're seeing here, is the biophoton energy coming off. What's that? A cosmic eye. No, it's a sprout. And why do we recommend sprouts? Well, you can look and see. There's just a whole lot of energy there. Okay. Now what happens with live food is, let me put it this way. When you cook food, you lose 50% of the protein. It coagulates. You lose 60 to 70% of the vitamins and minerals. and use about 95% of the phytonutrients. So it's really quite depleted. So you can literally eat half as much on the live food diet and get all the nutrients you need. And that's the key. So what happens is, and I don't call it a restriction, but you just don't need to eat that much. I mean, literally, I eat 1 meal a day. And I'm the same weight as when I graduated from high school. Okay? So it's like my weight's stable. And the idea of the right weight is your kind of optimal physical, mental, and kind of healthy weight. That's kind of what we're talking about when we're saying it. And then you know if it's right because it just stays the same. That's how you know when you're on the mark. Okay, so what Dr. Spindler found from the University of San Diego was that if you cut down your calories by 40%, you get a 400% activation of the anti-aging genes, the anti-cancer genes, the anti-diabetes genes, and the anti-inflammatory genes. Now, that's really important. Inflammation is the driving force behind all diseases. So, wow, we just had a huge increase in your life force and your life and longevity potential just by eating half as much. Now, we know from the Ayurvedic and other teachings, the less you eat, the longer you live. It's not new information, but he just took it to another level, talking about turning on the anti-aging genes. Okay, that's good. Anti-diabetic genes, oh, that's good too. So that was a real breakthrough. But it has to do with you're eating energy, not calories. If you just think calories, it's very gross and you're missing the point. Just like you saw the difference between the cooked cabbage and the raw cabbage, live food cabbage, it's energy. That's what we're eating. That's why you have more energy. Because the sunlight comes down, it gets captured by the plants, then we take it into us, and it transfers the energy to us. If it goes to a cow, it gets most of the energy. So it's a big thing. So you want to get that sun energy right from us. This is a true story. As a 4-year Sundancer and Eagle dancer, everybody else who was dancing got sunburnt. And there are really a lot of different things. I probably had the lightest skin. I didn't get sunburnt. For 4 years, I didn't get sunburnt. And you're out in the sun all day long. And you have, well, wait, for Sundance you wear a skirt, but you have nothing up top. And it's like, oh, why don't I get sunburnt? Well, the reason is, actually I had to pursue, why am I getting sunburnt? 4 years in a row, not a fluke. Like eagle dance, you stand from sunrise to sunset, hooked to the tree. It's a long story, but I'm just making a point. I'm out in the sun. There's no doubt about that. Okay, that's why it's called Sundance. So what it is as I realize is eating a 100% live food diet, I am eating sunlight. So you don't, also during the Sundance, you don't eat for 4 days. You don't eat or drink. And I was the only one out of 52 people to be able to do that for 4 years. But the point is, why? Because I'm eating the sunlight directly. It's not going to burn me because I'm already eating it and I've been eating it for years. So that's why I didn't get sunburned. Now, that was like a little bit of a mind blower for me, but I got it. And there's some researchers in Germany working with people with cancer, and they found that, again, people who were doing live foods as part of the healing could be out in the sun 4 times longer. So it kind of fits with that story. But that's really interesting. So when you're doing live foods, you are eating the sunlight. You don't get burnt. Okay? So that was like a wake-up call. the live foods also increases, the cell's a battery. The live food increases the battery potential. When our battery is discharged, that's why we don't have any energy. When we're eating the live food, we're charging the battery, and every little cell is a battery. You have a lot more energy. So that's what Dr. Eppinger discovered. And then the genetic upgrade is just what we've been talking about, Kollath. Enzyme preservation, not quite as much as people think as the main reason for live foods. I put it probably the 10th reason. It's not that important, and like only 10-15% of the protein is the enzymes come through, and it's not as much as it's a little over exaggerated. Live food is alkalizing, mineralizing. In 1936, the U.S. Congress said 99% of Americans are deficient in minerals. I don't think it's gotten better. Okay, it hasn't. Okay, I mentioned the bowel toxicity because you go going from 24 to 36 hours with live food to 40 to 100 hours. And so there's a lot more bowel toxicity going on. You just don't have that many live food people with constipation. It does happen. There's always an exception. It's not the rule. Okay? The heating the carbohydrates causes acrylic acid, acrylamide, which tends to cause cancer. Now, this is a theory by Dr. Paul Konchikoff in the 1930s. And he's saying when you cook the food, you change it. And so the body makes a reaction to it. So I always like to test things. I don't take it for the truth. And so one of my students did his experiments again. And she actually found that wasn't true. Cooked food didn't, organic food did not raise your white blood count. The only thing that raised it in the whole thing was hot dogs and junk food like that. Then it was like a white blood count like you would get with ptomaine poisoning. Okay, but as short from that, it's always good to check these things out. It didn't really make much difference, but it's out there as a belief system, and it's only for junk food. And now this other thing transfers the outer light to the inner light. That's what I'm talking about, both spiritually, but also you're eating the sun. You're eating the sunlight. So sun's a little bit too much to eat. Sunlight. Okay. And it's the best diet for spiritual life because you're bringing the light into you. And that outer light is activating your inner spiritual light. And that's actually how kind of the design play is about. So what's that? It's a lemon. Look at the energy of the live food. It's a lemon. I bet you never thought about lemons that way, right? That's a radish sprout. Look at the energy. It's like, wow. That's a corn sprouting. What's that? Cacao. Cacao is incredibly powerful. It's good for your brain, good for your heart. It is actually good for chronic fatigue. It actually decreases diabetes, tends to get diabetes by 34%. It's really good on all avenues. It opens your circulation and makes heart and brain really work significantly better. But look at the energy. This may affect how you think about your food if you think it is energy. Here's it's the same person. On the right, it's what the aura looks like. This is fingerprints from with cruelty photography after the person's been eating junk food for a few days. And on the left, it's the same person after they've been just eating a good organic, not even live food, just a good organic diet. You see there's a field coming out. So it just kind of validates it. Now we are light. That's this is inside a real living person, and that's the pineal gland, that little white area there. So we are giving off light. We literally are giving off light. That's the pituitary, giving off light. That's norepinephrine. This is epinephrine. It's wound 3.5 times. It's the crystallization. So these are hormones within ourselves. This is testosterone. That's estrogen. They're giving off light in frequencies. So now you're getting an idea. So I'm going to talk a little bit about spiritual life. This is a little bit more from a yogic point of view, but this is the paradigm, and we have Ida Pingali Shushumna. The Shushumna is the central channel. You can see it, the yellow going up. Ida Pingali are like the yin-yang kind of qualities, okay? And the Kundalini moves through those channels. There's actually 72,000 channels, but these are the 3 main ones. And why is this important? Because in my research, I discovered, because I had this meditation directive, eat and live in a way that supports the Kundalini. So I was working with a lot of people who had Kundalini awakening, kind of in India and the United States, is that meat and dairy act as a sludge or blockage to the flow of the Kundalini. So when people stopped doing that, there was an increase in the flow of the Kundalini through the nadis. These are the 3, those are like literally energy channels. So we have, obviously, we have our blood vessel system and so forth. So there's a subtle system called the nadi system where energy flows, the Kundalini flows. And I found that when people had meat, fish, chicken, dairy, eggs, and so forth, it tended to block the flow. Well, it didn't tend to, it blocked the flow. So that was actually a little bit of an awakening to understand that. And I saw that with lots of people when they were doing it. So the key then is really just that one teaching is the nadis, the subtle spiritual flow, the subtle spiritual energy, are indeed impeded by meat, fish, chicken, and dairy. The pain of misery, the pain of death the animal feels goes into you. It affects your consciousness, affects the nadis, it affects all the levels of the different bodies that we have. So that's a kind of a teaching from that. Now, ojas is the deep primordial energy. And that's what lines the nadis, it keeps too much fire. And what is good for that? Well, the omega-3s, basically plant-based protein versus meat protein, bee pollen, blue-green algae, chlorella, spirulina, coconut oil is actually really pretty good. Hemp seeds, avocados, nuts and seed milks, they play a big role in supporting the building of ojas, which protects us from the fire of the Kundalini in our nadis. The rest is part of a little bit more of lecture. There are different herbs that help and so forth too. So that's from a spiritual point of view. But now here's another point of view. When we go plant-based only, we're eating lower on the food chain. Now, okay, so what? Well, it turns out that according to the government agencies, pesticides and herbicides are stored mostly in animal tissue. Like 95 to 97% are stored in animal tissue. Okay, so, well, if you eat lower on the food chain, you're less affected. You're only getting a few percent of the pesticides and herbicides and toxins that are stored in the animal tissue. Okay, So what difference does that make? Well, it makes a huge difference. Right now, today, we are looking at the sperm count for men around the world, not just the United States, around the world, okay, is about 50%. If it goes just a touch lower, many, many men will be infertile. Right now, well, actually, even 20 years ago, they found that only 25% of college students, men, were fertile. Were infertile, I mean. Didn't have enough sperm. Now, what's the problem? Well, it turns out pesticides, herbicides, and all those things specifically destroy the sperm. So we're looking now at worldwide, because of the pesticides and herbicides, almost kind of the ending of fertility. That's a big deal. Okay, so we're just on the edge. Now, I'm going to joke here, but that's if you're eating meat, fish, chicken, and dairy. Remember, that's 96 to 97%, 95 to 97% of where the toxins are. So if you go plant-based vegan, we're going to hypothesize, but it's research that needs to be done, you're going to see that there are going to be a lot more men with more viable sperm. Does that mean the vegans will take over the world? I don't know. But it's an interesting thought. Okay, just think about that for a moment. Because they're not being so exposed. Now, women are affected too. And it was just shared the other day of infertility clinics when they took them off the junk food, went to organic food, not even live food, organic food. I think it was like 125 couples. They all, 100% success, became fertile and were able to have kids. So it really does make a difference. What we eat really does affect our ability literally to reproduce as a species. So it's worth thinking. Now, women who are eating meat, fish, chicken, dairy, and so forth, vegan women have only 1% of the pesticides and herbicides in their breast milk as meat-eating women. 1%. That's huge, because it means the baby is not getting filled with pesticides and herbicides. So it does make a difference in a lot of things in terms of survival of the species. Now, we know it also preserves personal health. We know just vegan and live food is always amplified, but people who are plant-based have 32% less heart disease. They have 35 to 50% less diabetes. You drop high blood pressure from 26% to 2%. Osteoporosis is 1/4 the amount of meat eaters going vegan. So it goes down the line with a variety of things. Lung diseases, cancer, cancer of prostate 3.6 times more. People doing dairy have, twice as much. Lymphomas, and it goes on. Eggs, you get literally 3 times more ovarian cancer. The list goes on. Points made. Vitality and energy, I already talked about, but I'm just talking about the health part. How about feeding the world? I have projects all over the world in prediabetes, and I'm working in 5 countries in Africa, and Mexico, and Brazil, and different places. And one of the big issues is the animal meat-centered diet tends to really, it's huge resource taking. It's about, roughly speaking, and everybody, they're kind of estimates, it's about 12 times more resources. If the whole world went vegan, we'd be able to feed the world 7 times over. If everybody went live food, it'd be 12 times over. So it's huge, the difference it makes. So people in America, if just cut down their meat, fish, chicken, all that, 10%, there'd be enough food to feed the 60 million people, 20 to 60 million because they estimate, and 44,000 kids who starve to death each day. So we're doing vegan agriculture focus and getting grants for farmers to start doing that in Africa and Mexico and different places for that very reason. So it can feed the world. We have enough food easily to feed the world 7 times over. It's not an issue, okay? Obviously, it protects against animal cruelty. It protects the ecology. I mean, literally, a person who is vegan saves 1.5 million gallons of water a year. That's huge, okay? And I won't go into all the details of that, but it makes a difference. And you save the land because farming takes out way less land than raising cows and sheep and stuff like that. And back to, it protects the mind, because eating lower on the food chain takes away the pesticides, herbicides, and gets us back to the diet that's best for the mind. Now, it fulfills the Niyamas, and what that means is the do's and don'ts. So you're not killing, you're not stealing animals' lives, stealing their souls, you're not stealing their skin and their fur, goes on and on. There's lots of pieces there, and also what we call the 10 speakings is the same thing. Okay, you don't murder, you don't steal, and so forth. It, as I explained, clears the nadis. The koshas are the layers of the mind. It doesn't contaminate that with the energy of death. And basically, it's the path. It's a diet for most spiritual paths. Now, it's not about about moral superiority. That we don't want to think that way. It's really about being responsible for our actions. The wise person knows the results of their actions. And so when you eat a certain way, you're going to get a certain result. That's what a wise person knows. That's what I'm sharing here. It's like, okay, that makes sense. Now, there are some mythological dangers. I'm going to call them mythological, because they really aren't true. But if you go, anybody goes to an acupuncturist and say, oh, no, you can't do that. It's not good for you. It's going to create a splenian deficiency. How many people have heard that? I'm just curious. Okay, right. So now you're going to see why it's total nonsense. There's reasons why they said that, because in the 1930s in China, pretty much the only people that basically survived and didn't die of malnutrition were the wealthy people who were able to eat some meat. But you can't draw a conclusion from that, except you have enough money to get some meats, so you can kind of survive. The rest, people had white rice and huge famine. So, spleen qi deficiency. Let's look at spleen qi deficiency. Weak digestion, blood sugar imbalances, weight problems, obesity, alcoholism and drug abuse, low vitality, and chronic fatigue. Okay, that's spleen qi deficiency. Now let's just get that in our mind. And now, what about strong spleen qi? Good energy, endurance, ability to grow and learn, good memory, emotional balance. So I just read the 520 people that we saw, and that's what they really had, wasn't it? Increase in vitality, increase in energy, increase in thinking, increase in artistic ability, less, 400% less depression, 300% less anxiety. Okay. So what we're really saying is live food is the cure for spleen qi deficiency. Not the opposite. Not China in a famine in the 1930s. This is not what we're talking about. So people took that experience and made that as if that's the result of it. But what they were really describing is starvation and malnutrition. Very different. So it's the cure. if you look at the real results with live food. Second myth is it creates a vata imbalance. Anyone ever heard that? Okay. So what's a vata imbalance? You're nervous, you're anxious, you get thrown out of balance real easily, you're super sensitive, you're very fragile. That's a vata imbalance. Now, this is an Ayurvedic term, okay? So, I work with people who are pure vata. There's three things, kapha, pitta, vata, and there's 9 different variations. But I'm just making a simple point for those who know about Ayurveda, is that what vatas need are warm, oily, salty, sweet-tasting, kind of watery foods. And if you do that, which you can easily do on live food without going into the details, you don't get a vata imbalance. And it's really easy to have that diet. I have a chapter on that in my book, Conscious Eating, how to balance it. So if you just take that approach. Now, if you are just eating leafy greens, yeah, you'll get a vata imbalance. Because that's totally, it's not good for vatas. But if it's sweet and oily and salty and warm, you get actually a vata balancing diet, which again is easy to do with live food. So that's the second myth that goes on. So, as Ralph Waldo Emerson said, society is always taken by surprise by any new example of common sense. We've got to apply a certain common sense when we talk about diet. Now, people often say vegans are deficient, and it's true. But also, meat eaters are deficient too. That's the thing we got to understand. So 90% of meat-eating women are deficient in DHA. Well, DHA, what is that? Well, you need it for a healthy pregnancy, number one. You need it for healthy brain function. You need it for emotional balance. You need it to protect yourself against depression. You need it to treat postpartum depression. That's the main treatment. So I can go on, but the fact is 90% of everyone is deficient in long-chain omega-3s, whether you're a plant-based or a meat eater. 80% of the population, meat eaters and vegans, are deficient in magnesium. And it is true that a plant-based diet is going to give you more magnesium. It's going to give you more calcium. But they're still going to have the deficiencies because you need magnesium to make your brain work, make your neurotransmitters, and good for your heart, good for your adrenals, good for your pancreas. You need it for lots of things. And we live in a society that's so stressful that we're using up all these kind of nutrients for the stress. Magnesium is an anti-stress mineral. So again, plant-based diet and meat eaters are deficient, but plant-based people are a lot less deficient because magnesium is very high in the leafy greens, plant food, and the chlorophyll. Okay, 75 to 95% of people are deficient in iodine, and that again is meat eaters and vegans. So we're sharing kind of a equality here. Why is iodine important? Well, if a mother has adequate iodine, their baby will have, on the average, a 13-point higher IQ. They did an experiment in Indonesia where they fed kids, 6, 7, 8-year-olds, 8-year-olds, and they fed them iodine for 3 months, 12 weeks, and their IQs went up 8 points. So you need iodine for brain development. You need it for your thyroid. You need it actually for your skin. The skin has more iodine than any other organ, 800 milligrams. So everybody is deficient. Big problem. In China, they put iodine in the water because they know it's really good for your intelligence. Super good. They actually compensate for it. Okay, how about B12? Well, guess what? We got the same problem. At the minimum, 200 nanograms, 40% of meat eaters, that's a lot, and 80% of vegans are deficient. But when we go up to the optimum, 400 nanograms, 400 to 450, you got about 80% of meat eaters and about 90% of vegans. Everyone needs a B12 supplementation to have optimal functioning brain and nervous system. And particularly kids, because they need to be there. They're not born with B12, and so they start with 0, and they need it for neurological development. So again, across the board at optimum doses, meat eaters and vegans are pretty close in the deficient. Carnosine is another thing. Everybody's deficient in that. You need it for mental strength, health, and longevity. Minerals, although plant-based food has way more minerals, still many people are deficient. And then vitamin D, 85% of the population, whether you're a vegan or meat eater, is low in vitamin D. So what we really see is everybody's got deficiencies, and we need to take some supplements, whether you're a meat eater or whether you're a vegan. So I just want to dispel the myth that it's only vegans who are deficient. The truth is, plant-based people have more plant-based diets give you more B3, B6, magnesium, and vitamin D than meat-based diet. So actually, it's really the opposite. And also way more vitamin C and way more micronutrients. Okay, vitamin K, the same thing. People are deficient. And beta carotenes. Everybody kind of has a problem with the vitamin A because we don't convert it. Only, I'm going to say, 50% are able to convert it. So 27 to 45% of people only convert 9% of beta carotene to vitamin A. So again, it's a problem across the board. So that's just looking at that discussion. It's really important to understand that everybody in our world today, not 200 years ago, different world, different quality of soil. Now the soils are depleted. We can't get the nutrients that they used to get. So I use the word cuisine and versus his diet, because diet is more about macronutrients. And cuisine is style. There's a vegan style, Cajun style, Cantonese style, French style, different ways. Let's get me something to drink. So, the key is balancing our individual diet, our individual genetic needs that fits with our chromosome. That's the key to being successful. Does everybody get that? If you don't do that, you won't be as successful. Yeah. If you don't balance it to your actual genetic program, you're not going to be as successful. This is the study I'm referring to. Journal of Clinical Nutrition, June 2013. So it's a real study, major journal. And basically, so chromosome 19 tells you how much protein, how much carbohydrate, how much fat, the right ratios for you. So all the diet experts are out there telling you this is the best diet, that's the best diet. There's no one best diet. There is no one best diet. Get it. There's only the best diet for you that's uniquely for you, that fits your unique genetics. That's really key. 70% of the population needs a little bit higher protein. 30% needs a little bit lower protein. There is no one best diet. When people say, yeah, you want to have a high complex carbohydrate, low fat, low protein diet, that's actually good for 30% of the population. it accounts for a lot of failures, people trying to do that diet, and they fail on basically the vegan diet. So just remember, you've got to do it to your constitution. I have certain questionnaires to help you point that out, whether you need a higher protein, lower protein. That's a big issue. Fast oxidizers need a higher protein. Slow oxidizers need a lower protein. We're just unique, okay? And we got to understand that. So this is the Ayurvedic Kapha Pitta Vata. I'm just showing you to let you know that uniqueness is not a new idea either. It's been around for thousands of years, and each of these types need a different kind of diet. Okay, and then in the early 1930s, they already had figured out about fast and slow oxidizers, high protein, low protein people. Not new information, almost 100 years old. Yet we're still acting as if there's one diet for everybody, as if we're a bunch of cows. Just isn't what is. So what about protein in the diet? I'm going to look at the macro parts. So as I said, 70% need a higher protein. That's about 70 grams a day. 30% need lower, which is about 35. There's a range, and we're in that range. It's called the mTOR pathway. Now that pathway is the optimal amount of protein for longevity and anti-cancer. So it's significant to keep there. Yes, you can get way easily adequate protein in a live food diet. All these are really high in protein. The problem is you have to eat a bushel of them. It's, they say you can get adequate, but it's a kind of a white lie, okay? Because you can do it, but you got to eat a whole lot, which most people can't possibly do. So we do need protein concentrates that make a difference. But here are the top vegan proteins. So Popeye had it right. Protein, spinach is 49% protein, okay? And kale is 45% protein. And broccoli is, again, 45%. And cauliflower is 40%. Mushrooms, which are actually a really good source of protein, 38%. And parsley is 34%. Cucumbers, 24%. So we're kind of going down the line here. Tomatoes are 18%. Now let's look at beef, chicken, and eggs. So beef's about 25% protein. So it's about half as much as spinach. And chicken is 23%, and eggs are 12.5% protein. Fish, it varies. Tuna's 29%, going down to flounder, which is 13%. So there's a big variation with the different fish. But my point is that nothing is going to quite give you that. But just to be fair, meat is more concentrated protein. That's the point I want to make here. So even though we can say, okay, spinach is 49% protein, you've got to eat a lot of spinach to do that. Okay, so just so we're not confused, you do need, for most people, not if you're a slow oxidizer, but for most people who are fast oxidizers, you need a little bit of protein concentrates. Nuts and seeds are really good. You eat more nuts and seeds, and that works. And nuts and seeds are good for a lot of reasons. They did a study with 119,000 people over 30 years. That's a pretty good study. Okay, and if you just ate nuts, you had a 7% decrease in death rate. If you ate once a week, 11%. If you ate 2 to 4 times a week, you're up to 13%. If you had nuts and seeds every day, it's 20% less mortality. So it's an impressive kind of message. So what I find is that in today's world, you can have certain kind of protein concentrates that for fast oxidizers you can easily do. Chlorella, spirulina, all kinds of things are out there. It's really, really, really simple. And the highest I see most, in general, the highest I see, super fast oxidizers, people need lots of food, they have nuts and seeds and maybe 2 tablespoons of some of these protein concentrates 3 times a day. So that's it. What about fat? Well, breast milk, 54% fat. We need fat. We need the long chain omega-3s to have a healthy brain. Fat comprises 60% of the brain. All this anti-fat thing is actually dangerous. Low fat is associated, literally, a low cholesterol, less than 160, is associated with 4 times more depression, up to 6 times more suicide. I consider that pretty important. Women who are low in cholesterol are 21% more likely to have a miscarriage. If you have adequate cholesterol, you're looking at 5% tendency. People who have higher cholesterol actually have better functioning brains, better functioning memories, better cognition. So we need fat to optimize our function, particularly the long chain omega-3s. This is just a comparison. So I put people on a 25 to 45% fat in their diet, which, again, it varies according to your constitution. And we have Dr. Esselstyn and Dr. Ornish, this 10% low-fat diet, which I honestly don't think is so healthy for most of the population. And the funny thing is, the cholesterols, which I say don't worry about, because women with a cholesterol of 270 live 28% longer. That was a big, big study of 52,000 people. But you can see in the middle range that 159 is really pretty just where you need to be, having 25 to 45% fat in your diet. So it's really, really not a problem. The big problem is triglycerides, and that's way less because carbohydrates raise your triglycerides. So a high carbohydrate diet, 70-75%, is going to raise triglycerides, which are dangerous for your heart, which are associated with increased heart disease. So this is the cholesterol fact of the 28% Norwegian study, 52,287 people. And the meta-analysis, 21 studies, all combined 340,000, basically showing there is no difference between a cholesterol of 160 and 260. No heart disease. No evidence to support the widespread mythical belief that limiting saturated fat intake is beneficial or protective for heart health. And that's like studies for the last 30 years. So we have a myth. And actually we have a kind of a paranoia about cholesterol. It's like probably second or third in the list of things people are afraid of, okay, is the cholesterol. Don't worry about it. We need the cholesterol for our brains, okay? For example, this is studying in people, average age is 89. So they kind of look at that, and they found for each 39-point increase in cholesterol, there's a 15% decrease in mortality rate. And that's at 89, so it's kind of telling us something, because those people were likely to die. High cholesterol is associated with better memory. NIH study, okay? People with the highest cholesterol get better test results on cognition. Boston study, okay? So it's just something to keep in mind. And historically, our ancient biggest source of energy was fat. So, but there is a problem with low cholesterol. I mentioned increased suicide, violent behavior, more tendency for memory loss, and Parkinson's. So we want to the low-fat diet has some dangers to it. That's what I want to say. Same thing with omega-3s. People who are low in omega-3s are going to have more suicide, less better brain function, less better heart function. There's a lot of pieces going down here. you need the omega-3s for heart and brain and eye development in the babies. So it's also really good for college students. The amount of stress they have, they took college students and gave them lots of omega-3s before taking tests. Their stress was 1/2. The college students, 1/2. So it supports the manufacture of acetylcholine, which is really good for your brain, and GABA, which helps you relax. So just a few things there. It protects against cancer of the skin, cancer of the prostate, cuts breast cancer down by 50%. So we're talking important. You need fat, you need the long chain omega-3s, it's really important. Specifically, optimally, they're talking about 1,200 milligrams of the DHA and 400 to 600 milligrams of EPA as kind of the optimum zones for your overall health, brain function, vitality, really longevity, and mental state, and really antidepressant. Okay. Carbohydrates. This is a Taoist teaching. A little bit it's about if you mix smoke and fire, your body will not walk on the jewel pond. This is women Taoists. The jewel pond is a term they use for liberation. And so they're commenting on what to eat. This is 11th century. And it's abstaining from cooked food. And also bigu, grains. Okay? Because they say eating grains, and the new books are out like Grain Brain and things like that. They saw really 1100, okay, that the eating of grains inflames the brain and blocks your spiritual progression. So it's not a new idea. It's been around. In 475 BCE, the Taoists said, don't eat grains. It's not good for your spiritual life. Fructose is another kind of myth. It isn't really so good for you. And it's confusing, but I explain it in the diabetes lecture. It doesn't directly raise your blood sugar, but indirectly it disorganizes the leptin and insulin signaling and turns off, it doesn't turn off the ghrelin, which is a hormone that says eat, 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 eat. So people on a high fructose diet tend to be overweight a lot more. It disrupts the whole thing. It also inflames the brain. Its cancer cells love it 10 times more than they love glucose. So it's not so safe. It's associated with increased diabetes, increased heart disease, increased high blood pressure, gout, kidney stones, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and increased agings. So non-alcoholic fatty liver disease 2 to 3 times more if you're eating a high diet in fructose. We want to not go above 15 to 25 grams. What is that? It's 2 bananas, a few kiwis, something like that. That's your safe zone. Okay? I just want to get, okay. So that's the key. So brain inflammation is a big deal. Cancer, it feeds cancer cells, accelerates aging. That's fructose. Okay? Not really better. Okay. So gluten's another issue that's kind of hit the consciousness. And that's, I think, what the Taoist women were talking about. But they didn't have the word gluten. They just knew grains inflamed the brain and blocked the spiritual process. So turns out gluten in the gluten grains creates inflammation in the brain, which is associated with Alzheimer's and decreased cognitive functioning. And a lot more blood sugar. And if your blood sugar goes higher, your brain shrinks faster. And with age, your brain tends to shrink unless you're doing all these other things like getting adequate B12, which helps your brain grow. There's a lot of play going on here. So A1C is a measure of sugar in your body. So people who with the highest A1C had almost double the amount of brain shrinkage compared to people who had a normal A1C. So it's a significant thing. So it's the inflammatory carbohydrates, low and healthy fats are where we're seeing an attack on the nervous system and brain function. Now what about sugar? Well, sugar is, most people accept sugar as a problem. It's associated with depression, it's associated with heart disease, it's associated with cancer. It scrambles the brain. It just goes on and on. So here are the optimum ratios, but with a lot of variability. 25 to 45% fat, 10 to 20% protein. A person who's a slow oxidator, about 10% protein, and carbohydrate 25 to 45%. Now why is this important? Because when you understand all these things, then you can design a live food diet that will be successful because it fits your constitution that's laid out in chromosome 19. This is very scientific. It's not about belief systems. We are unique people. We are unique individuals. We have unique gene patterns. We need to understand that. And then we can pick the right diet. So when, again, there is no one diet for everybody, okay? And the live food diet is a cuisine. It's not a diet of macro, it says there's only one way, one right macronutrient ratio. You've got to figure that out. You've got to really think about it. So the idea is food's energy. That's the thing I want you to get. And how do you feel? How do you judge? Is this diet working? Don't read a book. That's not going to help you. Trial and error, find out the diet ratio that gives you the most energy, the most endurance, the most focus, the most clarity of mind. That's how you pick it out. It's your direct experience. Nobody can tell you what you're supposed to eat in that way. Yeah, I can say live food, but that's a cuisine. I am talking about the macronutrient ratio. That's where you get successful. That's where I get, working with clients, 99% success rate on a live food diet because we're making it to their constitution. We're individualizing, and that's what I'm saying. And in conscious eating and rainbow green light food cuisine, we have, how to figure it out, questionnaires to do. So it's well within your ability to roughly figure it out. I have a thing for fast flow oxidizers. I have a thing for Ayurvedic body types and so forth. And once you get that figured out, then it's still trial and error. Okay? A chart can't give you the full answer, but it'll tell you how to look at it. And then we experiment. You are the divine experiment. And it's called trial and error. But you have to pay attention. You make a shift, see how it is for 4 months. Because you can feel good for a week. Oh, good, I did a certain diet. I feel great. Well, yeah, but we kind of have to look at 4 months. Is it sustainable? Does it make you feel good throughout the day? How's your energy? How's your mind? How's your memory? How's your thinking process? These are really important questions. You got to just ask the question, and then you start coming up with, a way to think about it, which is really what I'm talking about. That's the why and how of live food. So you've heard, yes, live food really does make you stronger, more flexible, and improve brain function and stimulate the optimal balance of your neurotransmitters. Getting rid of 400% of depression, 300% of anxiety. These are real things, but you still have to get the right combination to get these optimal effects. And that's really kind of the bigger point that I'm making. And it's good to think about food as energy and not as calories. Okay, so this is a little painting somebody did. It was at the end of I did a 40-day fast. And it was at the end of that. Like we are an energy vortex. That's what it is. And the idea is to eat in a way to become a superconductor of the divine from a spiritual point of view, but also from a physical, in this world point of view. Because if you're really eating the right diet, you'll have optimal physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual health. You have to have all four to have the right balance. That's the way you know you're really on the right diet. See, that's the key. So that's just kind of the ending point there. So in each generation, we're given the medicine for healing that generation. Okay? And the live food, plant-based diet is the medicine for healing this generation. And probably future generations as well. And I just have added this to my lectures. So you might feel bad about the state of the world. A lot of people do. But it'll be okay because people like you are here on this planet. Oh, okay. Very good. So we have a few minutes for questions. Yes, go ahead. Yes.
For the needles, where to place them? To reduce blood sugar levels?
Well, I don't use acupuncture for that. I mean, you can, but it's pretty standard, to be honest with you.
Okay, all right, fine.
It's pretty standard. The main thing is it's the diet that heals the diabetes.
Okay. Fine.
And when we did all the research, we didn't do anything extra to think, oh, it's because of the acupuncture. See what I mean?
Yeah.
It was all diet. That's how we did it, to have a cleaner research.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
So I assume that you can get saturated fats from coconuts and palm oil.
Correct.
Where did people who weren't in tropical areas get saturated fats aside from meats?
Well, the truth is coconut oil is available pretty much everywhere at this point. You can't miss it. You can get it at Safeway.
Oh, now, yes, but I mean
Yeah.
historically, like in times past, how did mankind get it?
You know, it varied. I don't know what they did, because you can get these kind of long chain omega-3s in your blue-green algaes. You can get it in the spirulina. So it's available, not as obviously like coconut oil. So my answer is you can still get it. There's certain plants that have the omega-3s as well. And you also can make them. You make it internally. You can convert it with the other fats. Yes.
What do you think of bitter melon for diabetic?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand what you said.
Bitter melon for diabetic patient.
Bitter melon.
Oh, that's good for diabetes, yes. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, how it acts?
It's a classical herb, usually in India, for diabetes. But we didn't give people those things. We just did it with diet for the same reason we didn't do acupuncture. Later, afterwards, we gave different herbs after the research was done. And bitter melon is a main player. Any other questions?
Thank you for your talk. Is there any one set of tests available that would give you a baseline for these items you're talking about, be they vitamin, minerals, etc.? And do you have a book where you can customize your own diet?
Well, all my books are about getting the understanding so you can customize your own diet. Because ultimately, only you can do that. That's the point. But you have to, my 13 books, Conscious Eating, Rainbow Green Life Food Cuisine, Spiritual Nutrition, are all about the background so you can create your priorities for customizing.
Yes, hi.
There is a problem because, unfortunately, there's no average person, which is nice to know, okay? So there's no average blood results either. And on top of that, even the blood tests are about 80% accurate. But think, you're given a range as if there's an average you. And we are unique individuals, so that throws a whole different way of understanding blood tests. So they're not as helpful. So two people can have the same vitamin B3 values, but for one person they're deficient, and another person it may be fine or it may be excess because of our unique physiology. Now, does that cause a problem? If once you understand that it's really your body is different from somebody else's body, your need for B3 or B6 or B12 is different than someone else's, then it gives you the option to look at more intuitive ways to kind of design your nutrient intake, if you get what I'm saying. But I don't want to freak you out by thinking, throw away your blood test. But I have to be honest, I don't personally, myself, I don't really do blood tests. I'm kind of monitoring in different ways. So maybe once a year, maybe once every 2 years, I'll take a look to see how, on certain things. But it really is kind of more of an internal way because we are unique. And eventually, it's just seeping into allopathic medicine. Oh, we can't give everybody the same dose just based on their weight because their bodies handle our medicines differently. They're just getting to that concept. So it's not that far out of concept that even allopathic world, which is good, is now beginning to try to individualize certain doses to and certain medicines to people's constitutions. So they say, well, that medicine that works for A, B, and C doesn't work for D, E, and F. So they're now making efforts to distinguish. And eventually, it'll get to where they can figure that out. Okay.
Yes, question. I have been hearing from quite a few doctors that consuming oils of any kind, even if they're derived from healthy sources like coconut, avocado, olive oil, can damage the endothelium and is therefore a significant contributing factor to cardiovascular disease, and they're citing scientific studies to that effect. Would you care to comment on that?
Well, this is all a kind of controversy. It goes on, and I'm just going to refer to the fact that the more general studies with hundreds of thousands and millions of people over the last 30 years doesn't support that. I'm going to comment on the fact that the Mediterranean diet, which is lots of olive oil, is one of the highly respected diets for longevity and good health. So I kind of look at it clinically, like the Mediterranean diet, and I kind of look at all the research that's out there that I was citing. It's like the studies with up to 21 studies with 1.25 million people that really are saying it doesn't, taking saturated fat is not a problem in whatever form you take, which includes oils, which is part of that. So I kind of look at the bigger thing, and the low-fat advocates are really are saying something else. I think the predominance of the research, okay, The predominance of the research is suggesting that fats, oils, and so forth, as long as they're raw and cold pressed and so forth, are not causing a problem and are associated with longevity and are not associated with heart disease. So I think it's like, you know, I understand that argument, I understand the research is going to vary, but the predominance of it, not the exception, which you can do, you can find research to support everything, but you can't find hundreds of research supporting that versus a few. So my answer is the longevity studies and all the studies that I've been talking about outweigh those kind of exceptional studies.
There's one more, one more comment that they're claiming that those people are claiming that the Mediterranean diet's benefits are because of the foods, and therefore, even though the oils are included, the foods are what give it the health promoting aspect in spite of the oils being present. So I just want to make that comment.
Right, but you can't say that. You don't know what it is. You just know that there's lots of oil in the Mediterranean diet, and it's not damaging anybody's health. You could say it's because of the foods. I don't think it's that healthy a diet compared to a live food diet, but it's got lots of oil in it, and that's my point. And there's lots of evidence that olive oil is good to treating blood pressure, and it's good for expanding your arteries, and lots of things that happen. But the point is, that's all academic argument. The fact is the diet has been shown to be good, and it has lots of olive oil. Therefore, it wouldn't necessarily, you can't say it's going to be bad for your health. And you can't say because of the food, which I think is just mediocre, is somehow overriding the olive oil. I mean, you can say whatever you want. You can make all these picky arguments, but it doesn't really hold water.
Hello? You have a
Yeah.
question? Hello, over here?
Yeah, go
In
ahead.
terms of individual protein requirements, how does one determine if you're a fast oxidizer or a slow oxidizer?
So I have a questionnaire, 30 questions that gives you a pretty good idea. If you're like 20 yeses and 10 no's, that's pretty much whatever that is. But the second thing is trial and error. Very practical. So if you eat a high protein meal and you feel satisfied and you feel good and it's lasting for the next 4 hours, probably the right diet. You eat a high protein meal and you feel congested and weak and not feeling so good, probably the wrong diet. If you eat a high carbohydrate diet, just vegetables and salad, and you're hungry in an hour, pretty good chance you're a fast oxidizer and it's the wrong diet for you. If you eat, like myself, I eat 1 meal a day, and it's mostly salad with a few nuts and seeds, and I'm full for the rest of the day, probably a slow oxidizer. You see what I'm saying? It's like a clinical thing. How do you feel when you're eating? How do you feel after you're eating in terms of sustained health and well-being? Trial by error. We really need to go back to trusting our kind of direct experience. So I hope that helps. Yes?
Wait, start again.
Can you tell us about the genetic marker 19?
Well, it's a 19, it's chromosome 19.
Chromosome 19, yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that and how accurate that is, since genetics seems to be the big thing and not food, and genetics seems to cure everything and not food. And since we didn't know anything about genetics, all the Sicilians lived till 100 and the Irish died at 60.
Well, I happen to agree with you. I was just trying to make a point. You still have to figure out the right ratio. The point I'm making is that there's no one diet for everybody, and that's really the key. Once you get your unique individual, I don't have people to get a genetic test. Anyway, you can. It's still at the experimental age. You can just figure it out by seeing how you feel and your energy and your sense of well-being. That's the way to do it. I'm making the point, however, is that there is some genetic evidence that suggests we are unique individuals and we need to do the research on ourselves. Do you see what I'm saying? I wouldn't go to a genetics for saying, well, this is a diet and I should have X amount of protein, X. It's not that detailed. It's just variations. But the fact that it exists is kind of a message that supports we are unique individuals. And we got to do the research. Okay, time for one question more before we stop. Okay, go ahead. Question on type 1 diabetes. But I'm going to hold because this isn't a talk about diabetes. Okay, I want to be fair. So anything about the live food, vegan? Question. Last question.
Hi.
Make it a good one. Go ahead.
Hello, Dr. Cousens.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm over here.
Okay.
Hi, Dr. Cousens. The
Yes.
the MTHFR, can that be reversed? The
No,
mutation?
it's a no. But what that is that certain people don't make folic acid. There's a break. So you just need to get the intermediary in your B vitamins. And there's at least 2 companies who would have that intermediary that in your B vitamin thing. So for people with that genetic thing. So it's a good thing for producing folic acid. If you have the genetic thing that doesn't have a full pathway, you do need to get a B vitamin that has the intermediary step. So it's an important question. It's a detail unless you have that problem.
Thank you, doctor.
Good. So the way I want to close with this is that there isn't one diet for everyone. We are unique individuals. The live food diet amplifies every level of your well-being, and we have to be very, very thoughtful in applying it to make it work. So thank you very much. Very good. And have a good rest of the day.